Hi, this is Robert DeStott. I'm founder of TMI Tennis Academy. This training tape is broken down into 3 sections. Section 1 will be led by Master USPTA Pro Mike Van Zuffen to my right. He will demonstrate the technical techniques of the tennis game as well as technical drill. Part 2 will be led by Robert Page, head trainer for TMI. He will lead the conditioning and the footwork drill. And the third part will be led by Dr. Steveson for rehab and rehabilitation, how to correct minor injuries when an athlete gets hurt.
Hi, I'm Dr. Derek Steveson, a licensed physical therapist here in Phoenix, Arizona. Had the privilege of helping direct some tennis academies that are local here, international professional tennis academies, and also have an association with the Major League Baseball club, the Arizona Diamondbacks, as their official rehabilitation consultant. Also had the privilege of working with numerous professional athletes from all types of sports, as well as a lot of amateur athletes and youth athletes as well. Today we're going to talk a little bit about tennis, and specifically we're going to articulate and demonstrate some hopefully simple and very easily used stretching, warm-up exercises or routines that you can do before your tennis either workout or your game. And we're going to try to focus our efforts on keeping things more dynamic. Dynamic activities are basically overcoming the more static stretching routines that we've done in the past. So we're finding that preparing athletes for a sport, which is obviously participating in a sport like tennis, you're using your whole body in an integrated way. We're wanting to show you some sub-threshold or low-level activities that you can do to integrate into tennis motions more safely and more successfully to help alleviate some pressures and pains that you may already be experiencing, limit some of the chances for failure or injury. And to do so, we're going to break it down into an upper body routine, a lower body routine, and a core activation routine. And so looking at the 3 different spectrums of the body, from the upper body routine, the lower body routine, and the core routine, we know that when you play tennis, you never just use your legs, and nor do you just use your upper body. So keep in mind that when we're doing our demonstration, the focus is on a certain part of your body, but it's going to all be integrated. The human body moves in 3 cardinal planes of motion. The sagittal plane, which you move front to back, the frontal plane, which you move side to side, and the all-important transverse plane, which is the rotational plane. And that's the plane of influence that I feel that is most often overlooked in training and therapy routines, and it's what we're basically going to focus our efforts on, is showing you how to warm your body up with rotation in mind. Even though I know from my time of watching tennis that you want to stay square so you can see the ball coming, there's always, with a backhand or a forehand, going to be some rotational component through your hips and through your core that we have to focus our efforts on. And so we want to really show today something that can take 10 to 15 minutes, enable you to do this with a tennis racket and perhaps a bench, a chair, or something that you're going to find at the tennis court. And then to keep it simple and not use a whole lot of equipment that a tennis player doesn't have. So we're getting on the simple side of complexity with our warm-up. We're kind of going back to the old school way of thinking, where we are going to use dynamic movements to help prepare our bodies in a low threshold way for higher activities and more aggressive activities, such as a competitive tennis game or competitive tennis training. Today we have 2 world-class tennis players in Tika and Wesley here, And they're going to be demonstrating some of these maneuvers, exercises, stretches, whatever you want to call them. I'm not going to get caught up on calling these things anything, but we're going to talk about the focus of what muscle group we are attacking in a sub-threshold integrated way to get it warmed up and prepared to play tennis. First and foremost, we have to attack the hip flexor, that deep muscle that lies underneath our abdominals. And to get that muscle to elongate, we want to start by having you just, as you can see, put your foot up on something that's about knee height. Keeping the back foot straight ahead. As you can see, both of them have both feet facing each other. Now, as they move forward and driving their front leg over their front foot, they keep that back knee straight and they keep that back heel down as much as they can as they go into some lumbar extension and keep their arms straight. Now, there's multiple ways you can tweak this, this maneuver. Go ahead and do that with your arms bent. Okay, go ahead. And now straighten it out. Once you get there, now you can straighten out, look up at the ceiling, and get your extension through that opposite hip. Okay? Now, again, we move more into dynamic stretching versus static stretching to prepare for tennis. So you want to go ahead and do like 10 to 15 or even 20 repetitions of this exercise, and it should go to a cadence of about like this, where you go, stretch, and come back. Move forward, stretch, and come back. So do just a couple to specifically attack the hip flexor. Next major muscle group that we're going to attack in a dynamic integrated way is the inner thigh muscles, the adductors. Big, powerful muscles that are very important for tennis because of their abilities to stabilize your pelvis and actually help you to unload all the muscular activity through the hips and through the core to help hit the ball. So as you can see, the motion that they're doing is very similar to what you just saw with the hip flexor, but now we're actually going after it in a different way because we've positioned their feet at a 90-degree angle. So they have one foot on the ground pointing out, the other foot still up on the step or the chair or the bench. And as you move forward, go ahead and drive your knee outward. So Tika, you're going to drive your knee to my hand. Wesley, you're going to drive your knee to the camera. You can use your arm on a chair or a fence if you have loss of balance. Go ahead and drive that knee out. Good. And again, you don't have to have a certain set of numbers that you do, 10 or 15 or 20. I like to focus on somewhere around 30 seconds of dynamic, slow, controlled, pain-free, work into more aggression towards the end of the set. Go ahead and do a couple more so they can see. You can see that this bottom leg stays straight. The front leg is bending over the foot. Okay, now when we're going after the hamstring, we're going to do the same concept. We're going to integrate it into a full body upright positional motion. Obviously, you're not going to have a step that's 2 or 3 feet off the ground at the tennis courts, but you're going to have a net. And so you can simulate this by this being the net and putting your hands on the net as well, or hanging onto your partner's shoulder while my foot's up on the net trying to rotate. The reason we rotate your foot is to get all 3 heads of the hamstring. The hamstrings uniquely connect onto the front of the tibia on the inside, the back of the tibia on the inside, and the back on the fibula on the outside. So since the 3-dimensional arrangement of the hamstrings is so unique and involves the rotational plane in its origin and insertion, we want to make sure we attack those muscles in a subthreshold way again, so it's not like we're aggressively attacking it. And we're going to actually rotate the foot while you keep the shoulders and the hips square. Now, the other things that you can tweak, so to speak, are how much knee bend you have. I always like having about 10 or 20 degrees of knee flexion here. You can pull your toes back, or you can point them straight to take out the gastrocnemius. You want to push down with about 5 to 10 or 15 pounds of pressure into the surface that your hamstring is being stretched on, whether it's the net, or if it's a chair, or if it's a bench. The other thing you want to keep in mind is if you take and push your hips back, go ahead, Wesley, and bend your left knee a little bit and shoot your hips behind you so you're sitting down. Now I've elongated the hamstring from this end of where it connects to the pelvis. So you can take and move your hips back. You can bend your knee a little more or a little less. Now the other thing you can do is reach your hands up further and take your nose down closer to your knee and pull your pull your toes back. Now, as you can see, we met his limit because as soon as I had him do all those things, his knee bent another 20 degrees. Now, that's not right or wrong. I just want to make sure that you all have an understanding that everybody's hamstring is going to have a different amount of flexibility. So those are the variables that you have to play around with in order to find that balance of just enough stretch that's not too much, and then a slow, controlled, integrated activation. And that's why we have the foot moving like a windshield wiper. All right, the next main muscle group that we're attacking is the anterior thigh, or the quadricep group. And as you can see, we're not isolating anything out, and everything that we're doing is involving some type of movement in a controlled way, and we're always accentuating the rotational plane. So go ahead and have both these guys demonstrate how to dynamically load and unload the quadricep in a stretching fashion. As you can see, they have their foot up, let's say on the back of on the net while you're out at the court, or the back of a stable bench, and they're going to rotate to the left and to the right while they bend through that front leg. So it's kind of like you're doing some work with the left leg that's on the ground and you're stretching the right quad. Now, the things that you want to keep in mind are how much you lean back with your hips towards your foot, how much your shoulders move into extension. Now, watch when I pull Wesley back and don't let him flex his trunk. Now, go ahead and go down, Wes. There you go. Now, add the rotation in. He's going to get a much more aggressive stretch when he takes his hip to here, looks at the ceiling and rotates, than if he doesn't. Or rather, if he does flex his trunk forward, that's going to put that muscle on slack. Okay, a couple more. And again, I'm not going to say do 2 sets of 15 repetitions. You need to just do it 20 to 30 seconds of slow, controlled movements, and then get more aggressive towards the end of your set. So the next main muscle group we're going after is the gastrocnemius, the soleus, the calf muscle. And again, we're attacking it through the transverse plane in an upright, integrated position. So if her hands are against a fence, go ahead. Bring your knee up, just like you're doing a regular calf stretch. So she's in this position. This foot stays on the ground. This knee stays straight. Now she's going to rotate that opposite leg in her pelvis. So she's rotating to the left and to the right, all through the pelvis, while she's keeping this foot and ankle on the ground, activating that gastroc-soleus complex in all 3 planes, unlocking the subtalar joint in all 3 planes. And as you can see, it's work. And of course, doing everything on both legs. Okay, good job. Now that we've just finished demonstrating the lower body focus, we're going to go now into the upper body focus. And again, our emphasis is always going to be on slow, controlled motion with a warm-up prior to tennis. So we're going to utilize what every tennis player has, which is a racket. That's going to help us get that end range stretch. And again, we're going to attack things in the sagittal plane, the frontal plane, and the transverse plane with a stretch. And since we know that our joints, especially our shoulder joint, moves in every plane, we're going to try to break it down into those 3 primary stretches, and both Tika and Wesley are going to demonstrate the sagittal plane stretch to begin with. And we always like to load things through one leg a little bit more than the other, just like tennis. So as you're lunging or reaching forward onto that front leg and taking that racket up over your head in the sagittal plane, go ahead. Staying fairly square, where our focus is not on a rotational stretch for the back with this, so you can see I want them to stay square as they shift onto that front leg, and that left arm that's going up over their head, you're going to get that stretch to that scapula on your scapulothoracic joint. Good. So it's a little bit of a weight shift forward. Use the racket. This left arm is going to be passive primarily, and the right arm is going to drive the racket to stretch the left arm. Good. Again, maybe 10 repetitions till you feel like you loosened it up. Good. Okay, the other end of the sagittal plane, we have forward flexion, but we also have shoulder extension. So now we're going to move into shoulder extension from the ground up with a little bit of a weight shift forward. As you move forward on that leg, you're going to drive that racket past your hip, almost like you're rowing in a canoe. And Wesley and Tika are going to demonstrate. As they lean forward, they're going to pull that back. And again, trying to stay square so you don't get a lot of rotation. There we go. You want to avoid this. See how he opened up and then you didn't get any stretch that time. So now as you lean forward, keep your chest square, drive that left arm behind you. Good? All right, as you can see, we've switched and now we're focusing on the transverse plane. Get into a forward lunged position, and if we're going after the right shoulder and the right scapula, we're going to put our left leg forward. So this should be an opposite. The last that we just showed was forward with the same leg that we were stretching. So now all of a sudden we're going to switch our stance. Our stance is left leg forward. The left arm's going to pull the right arm across, and you're going to stretch all of the parascapular tissue, the lat, the rhomboid, as well as part of your rotator cuff. So go ahead. Good. Shift back, and as you shift forward, good. This right arm is passive. The left arm is going to actively pull the racket through. Go ahead and pull. You're going to get that all stretched right through there. Activated. Good. It's grabbing that racket. Go ahead and show them how you're grabbing the racket. Okay? All right. Good. Now we're going after the other side of the transverse plane. We initially showed the sagittal plane into forward flexion and extension, and we just finished showing the transverse plane while reaching into what we call protraction for the right shoulder. Now we're going to move into a stretch into retraction for the right shoulder. So you'll step forward with the same leg. So now you have your right leg forward. The handle is in a position like this. The left hand on the other end of the racket. And as you lean forward onto your right leg, you're going to push the racket across your body. And now keep your elbow bent. Good. Keep your elbow up. Now drive that arm back there. Now you can feel this stretch. You're going to get a little of a pec stretch. Go ahead. Keep your elbow up. Drive it, drive it, drive it, drive it. There you go. Good, Tika. So as you lunge onto that right leg, you can see that you're keeping the racket high. Good. Okay. You can see as they shift onto that front leg, keeping this elbow up high. Now push that racket with your left arm across your body. There you go. Awesome. Okay, as you can see, this is the hand grip. Now we're going after the frontal plane overhead. So as Wesley and Tika both move the racket overhead, get their feet about shoulder width apart. Good. Good. Now they're going to shift to the left, the side that they're stretching. Go ahead and shift to the left. Boom. There you go. And the important thing here is to get that hip. You got to drive it with that hip. Good. So don't step, just get, there you go. Now take your hip way over to the left. Good. And then come back up. Stay overhead with the racket. Now pull this to the ground. Bend this elbow and pull this to the ground. And you're going to feel this stretch all through here in the side of your shoulder blade. Good. And good. Now we're moving into the other end of the spectrum in the frontal plane. And as you see, you can grab the racket behind your back. And as Wesley shifts onto his right hip and Tika switches over her body weight onto her right hip, you just pull that other arm up. And again, this is going to stretch all of the parascapular tissue, the rotator cuff, boom, this way. Now, this is important to note. If these kinds of things are causing you pain, absolutely do not do them. This entire program should be predicated upon the common sense factor of if it hurts, don't do it unless it's just muscle discomfort. Obviously, if you've had problems with your shoulders and you have an issue with putting your arm behind your back, by no means do we advocate that you do so with a load or overpressure, by doing some of these maneuvers. So always make sure that you've had clearance from your physician or your physical therapist or your trainer in past injury evaluation in order for you to participate in these types of stretches. And do a few more here, guys. Switch over onto your right side, pull the racket up, and the other arm, in this case their left arm, is being passively stretched while the right arm is pulling the racket behind you. Good enough. Okay, that concludes our upper body stretching routine. We've gone in the sagittal plane, both into flexion and extension. We've moved into shoulder protraction and retraction in the transverse plane, and now we're actually moving into and out of abduction and adduction in the frontal plane, all utilizing a stretch with the tennis racket and the opposite arm. So what we're going to focus our next phase after we've finished the upper body and the lower body warm-up routine, now we're going to get the ever most powerful abdominals turned on. So we're going to focus our efforts at getting the abdominals to do things that look, smell, and feel a lot like tennis. And we know that backhands and forehands are all involving hips loading and obviously ultimately a racket making contact with a ball. But the importance of connecting the power source from the legs to actually making contact with the racket through the upper body is obviously through the core and through the abdominals. So we're going to really focus our efforts at getting the abdominals to fire in the same way that they fire when they play tennis, which isn't conscious, which isn't isolated, which isn't laying on a physio ball, which isn't laying on the ground, squeezing your rib cage to meet your pelvis. All of those things are not wrong or bad exercises, but in pertaining to tennis, the abdominals don't do those things. So we're going to focus our efforts on getting the abdominals to fire in a way that looks, smells, and feels a lot like hitting a ball, backhand, a serve, or a forehand. So to start, we're going to have both Wesley and Tika. We're going to focus our emphasis on some transverse plane activation with a little bit of slow, controlled walking lunge backwards. Go ahead, guys. You're good. Good. And you're going to pull that racket back across your body. Good. Good. Try to keep the leg that goes back as straight as possible. There you go. And pull it forward. Good. Now the tweaks that we do with this to really turn on the abdominals, the most important one is the speed tweak. Right now they're going at a fairly slow, controlled pace, which is fine, but you may want to even move into a faster move. After the movement becomes more efficient and more effective and you're not wallowing all over the place, you may want to increase the speed to help improve the ability of the abdominals to fire. Go ahead and walk back, guys, and then let's do one more time. Now, some of the things that you can see that they're doing, sometimes they're moving their head, sometimes their head's staying straight, sometimes they're taking a step back and their knee is bending, sometimes it's taking it and it's keeping it straight. I'm not so concerned about whether or not those rules are being followed. Those are just tweaks. The main thing is that you get your tummy turned on. So by doing so, you may even want to add in a component of where you look up as you rotate. So why don't you add that in, guys, where you, look up as you take a step back and keep going. Good. And all that's doing is encouraging the hips to stay in front of the shoulder girdle, which is disassociating in yet another plane of motion. Besides the transverse plane, we're actually lengthening the abdominals in the sagittal plane as well by driving the hips forward and the shoulders into extension. Okay, now I'll take one of the rackets. And as you can see, we've just demonstrated this with a single side, where we were just going in one way, right here, pardon me. Left leg back, rotation to the right. You may want to eventually get it to the point where you can do both. Okay? And that's going to kill two birds with one stone. And usually what I suggest is that you just go on the baseline and go down and back. Do that 2 or 3 times. Now the next move that we're going to move into is start down here, guys. Obviously by turning on the abdominals with a backwards walking lunge maneuver. Now we're going to turn on the abdominals in a different way, but we're also going to really attack the butt. Try to get that butt starting to warm up. So now all you're going to do is you're going to lunge forward and rotate, lunge forward and rotate, going forward. Good. Yeah. Good. Good. I like how they're both looking straight ahead. And there's no rule. You can rotate over the knee or away from the knee. As you can see right now. Good. They're staying with just their right leg. There's Wes moving into his left. Okay, let's start that one again. So we've done the backwards walking lunge to get the core specifically turned on. Now we're doing a forward walking lunge. And again, if you've got problems in your back or your knees, you don't want to go nearly as deep as they just did. You can simply just come into this maneuver and start and come back to neutral. Take a step, a little bit of a rotation. There's no more than 30 degrees of knee bending involved with this if you have a problem with knee bending causing knee pain. And if you don't have a problem with your knees, there's nothing wrong with getting this deep and going all the way and getting a full rotation. And if you have balance issues, I always suggest doing it one side, back to neutral, one side, back to neutral. If you don't have balance problems, that's when you can get more dynamic and start loading reciprocally through the legs. Okay, go ahead and load reciprocally. So you're going to load, boom, go right into the other side, boom. Take small lunges and just medium depth. Good. 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 Okay, now move the head with the racket. Keep going, but move your head with the racket. And see, that's just one small tweak, moving the head with the tennis racket. Good enough. Okay, one last maneuver. Once you guys face each other. Okay, and we'll be coming this way. I just want you to take a side step. You should have your handle in your left hand. You should have it in your right hand. Good. Grab the top of it. Good. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a side step, pull it through, take a side step, pull it through. So your lateral lunges and pulling that racket through into rotation at the same time. So left foot, right foot, boom, and then come with it. Good. Side, boom, good. Side step, boom, awesome. Real good. Good. As you can see, Tika's getting a little bit deeper than Wesley, and there's nothing wrong with that. Wesley knows his limits and his flexibility, and we're not trying to conquer any mountains today. Now go back towards them. Switch hands. Good. Here we go. There you go. With a sideways lunge, a lateral lunge with rotation. You're still getting your core activated, you're getting your hips activated, and we all know how much motion occurs on the tennis court in what we call the frontal plane or the side-to-side plane. There's all kinds of baseline motion of moving to the left and to the right. Okay, good enough. Now we're moving into kind of a crossover step with opposite rotation. Good. So I want you to rotate that way. So grab your left hand on the handle. Good. Your right hand's on the handle. Good. Your left leg's going to come at me. Your right leg's going to come at me. And as your leg hits, start pulling your right hand and your left hand towards the camera. Yep. And drop down a little bit. Good. Not so much forward motion, Wes. Boom. Yeah. You're just coming sideways. Crossover step sideways with some rotation. Good. Crossover step sideways. Good. Crossover step sideways. Good. Crossover step sideways. Good. You guys are meeting in the middle. Okay, spread apart a little bit. Now switch hands. Good. Now your right leg, your left leg. You're going to rotate that way. You're going to rotate this way. Okay, go ahead and step. Step. Good. Crossover step and return. There you go. Pulling it that way. Step. Boom. Step it across. Rotate. Good. Step it across. Rotate. Step it across and rotate. Step it across and good. All right. Special thanks to both Wesley and Tika for diligently working through all of this after probably only being on the court 10 hours today with 10 more hours to go. But we're anxious to see how you like these new moves. And they're actually going to be a lot of fun because you go at your own pace. There's nothing that you have to do from a strain standpoint, so if something hurts, don't do it. Remodify it, tweak it, find a different way to do it that doesn't cause problems, and by no means do you have to do this whole program. You may want to pick and choose 2 or 3 different things out of this program that you integrate into your already existing successful warm-up routine that you're doing before you practice and before you play.